crush your enemies.
They drew first blood, not me.
See them driven before you.
Oh, my user.
And hear the lamentation of your women.
But I pity the fool.
Glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate.
Phone home.
They're here.
Oh, real light sleeper, child.
Welcome to Vintage Video, where we're rewatching the 80s so you don't have to. We'll be reviewing every major film release of the 1980s in chronological order, overanalyzing what you've seen and spoiling what you haven't. I'm Patrick O'Reilly.
I'm Jesse Bayless.
And I'm Richard Wells.
And today we're discussing Parasite, aka Parasite in 3D, released March 12, 1982. It was written by Alan J. Adler, Michael Shoob, and Frank Levering, directed by Charles Band, and released by Embassy Pictures. Sam Levine was born the same day this film came out. Sam the Mam Levine.
Who's Sam Levine?
He's the guy, he was on Freaks and Geeks. He wasn't Martin Starr.
Oh, yeah, never mind. I remember who he is. Yeah.
The film's three writers, Alan J. Adler, Michael Shoob, and Michael Levering, met and outlined the title first, then a bit of the story. They pitched it to Charles Band, who hurriedly attached Irwin Yablans, whose Compass International Pictures had found great success with their debut release Halloween. 3D specialist Randall Larson talked director Band into a 3D release, and the film was set for a January 82 release with a $6 million budget, but I can't find any explanation why the eventual production budget was only $800,000. It was shot in 3 weeks and became the first in a wave of 3D horror films for the 1980s. In a limited New York release, it brought in $600,000 opening weekend, nearly recouping the entire production budget before it went wide. Despite middling reviews and accusations of campiness, by the time it ended its theatrical run, Parasite had amassed $5.5 million in the box office and was fast-tracked for a sequel, again starring Robert Glaudini.
Did it actually get a sequel?
It did not.
Oh.
Unfortunately for the franchise, the sequel was scrapped when Embassy was sold off to the Coca-Cola Company in 1985. The version we watched was a 3D Blu-ray released by Kino Lorber in 2019, trying to keep our streak alive watching all the 3D releases in actual 3D. The Kino Blu-ray is actually a remaster, so not just a red-blue shift, but actually making use of our 3D television's capabilities.
To be fair, I didn't watch the whole thing in 3D.
I was going to mention that. A lot of it seemed like practical production 3D, but I'm convinced at least a few of these shots are post-converted based on my own work experience in 3D post-conversion. For the most part, it's a subtle depth that doesn't overly strain the eyes, but we didn't all get through this one wearing the glasses. So if you're the type to struggle with basically any 3D presentation, you won't enjoy this either. Compared to our only previous 3D title, Coming At Ya, there's not nearly as many gimmicky shots where people just randomly throw stuff at camera, but they still get some good mileage out of the technology.
There are definitely some gimmicky things of like, let's just hang a bunch of junk
in the foreground.
Yeah. Well, what's going on in this garage? I don't know. They got like chains, balls of chains hanging like a monkey's fist.
But in Coming At Ya, it would be like people just like spitting stuff directly down into the camera in their lap.
And also, this one didn't have any of that like super deep 3D that made my eyes go cross.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but there was definitely, so like, I feel like I'm a canary in the coal mine for bad 3D because it just like gives me a headache and I can't stand to watch it, and I'm closing one eye half the time here. There was a bunch of shots that I'm just like, I don't even understand the depth that they're trying to put on these things. Like,
it's usually when stuff is way too far in the foreground that suddenly I can't tell where I'm supposed to be focusing, and I'm getting a lot of double imagery.
Exactly.
But there were only like 3 or 4 shots in the whole thing that did that to me.
There was more than that for me. I mean, I only made it through half the movie in 3D, but especially at the beginning, there was a lot of those shots.
Well,
I think they were all the post-converted shots because honestly, you know, when they point the shotgun straight at screen, they look fine. But
the Kino Blu-ray has a 2D version also, so if you're into that, there you go. The film opens with the word Parasite in green block letters sliding up out of a flat red background. The word fades away and a red fog dissipates to reveal an overhead shot looking down on Robert Glaudini as Dr. Paul Dean strapped to a gurney in a laboratory. One strap over his forehead holds his head in place, and another over his waist keeps him on the gurney, but his hands are free to move about the cabin, and he appears plainly able to unstrap himself if he felt like it. A hand with an X tattoo, logo of the fictional company Zyrex, reaches into frame to tighten his head strap. We cut to an insert of a single-celled organism floating around in a microscope slide. And in the next shot, Dr. Paul Dean is free again, looking into the microscope in a lab. He picks up some tweezers to poke at the sample and moves a dish of small worms to a tray in the foreground. Most of the film's 3D utilization comes in this form. A flat surface in the foreground crowded with scientific equipment to accentuate the distance to the character speaking behind it. We cut back to Dr. Dean strapped to the gurney, and we are playing through the shot with duplicate or triplicate frames as a steppy fake slow-mo that always bothers me but is admittedly harder to focus on in 3D. I don't like when they do this steppy slow motion. Dr. Dean's eyes roll down to look at his own body with a panicked expression, and we cut back to Dr. Dean free in his lab again. He tries to load the tray of worms into a small machine, and the same tattooed hand grabs him again and pulls his arm back, causing him to spill the sample. He shoves Tattoo Hand backward, and one of the worms lands on his lab coat, but digs right through it into Dr. Dean's chest as he screams. Dr. Dean, or Paul, as people will refer to him moving forward, regains his composure and picks up one of his laboratory thermoses to smuggle the remaining worm samples out of the lab, though it seems like there's only two now, the one that burrowed into his chest and the one in the thermos. We see him back on the gurney again, and the camera tracks down to his undulating chest as he screams. An enormous krite mouth bursts out of his chest, and then another out of his brain. Krites being the creatures from the Critters films, but that's what they look like. A 2-foot-long tadpole with a 1,000-tooth smile of razor-sharp teeth.
But because Stan Winston did the creature effects.
Oh, okay.
And he also did the creature effects for Invaders from Mars. And the Invaders from Mars, is it Jesse? I don't know if you can see like the mouth openings for the creatures in that.
Yeah, the mouths are
very similar. Paul wakes up screaming in the driver's seat of a parked van and quickly realizes this was a dream. But it wasn't all a dream. Some of it was expository prologue. And I think basically all of this happened except the monster exploding out of him.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you with that. But I'm a little confused about the being tied to a table part.
I think the thing dug into his chest and then they experimented on him for a while.
Okay, but they did that in the backwards order.
Right. And then they never show him escape from the laboratory.
Yeah, it's a little confusing because at first you're like, oh, did they put this in him on purpose? And that's what I took from the beginning scene. And then you see it fall on him on accident.
Or it's a mix of flashbacks and then after he spilled it on himself, he got away. And the rest of it is a terrified nightmare of what will happen to him if they ever catch him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so being tied to a table might be more of that dream stuff. Okay.
That's what'll happen if they catch up with him.
Sure.
Paul starts the van and drives down the road away from a billboard for Zyrex that announces the year of this particular post-apocalypse, 1992. Do you guys recall the last time we saw a film that portrayed a significantly changed world in the weirdly near future? Hint, it was 1994.
Escape from New York?
No.
Aftermath?
No.
Was it Looker?
Nope. They mention the year often in the film. There's even songs with 1994 in it.
Is it the Apple?
It is the Apple. The van zigzags through the mountains in what looks like the Ojai area. He comes to a gate outside a work camp and slides it open to drive in. When he parks inside, he draws a weapon and stares down a passing tarantula and a few feet further, a rattlesnake. He hears a woman screaming for help from inside one of the buildings, and there he finds a cafeteria with several ladders stacked together for an interesting 3D foreground mess.
I'm not sure the purpose of these stacked ladders.
Just to slow people down, interrupting what's going on here.
Yeah, there's a lot of ladder play in this as far as set decoration.
Yeah. Two men hold a woman against a wall in the kitchen as she screams for them to let go. They rip her shirt off, and Paul raises a weapon to fire a warning shot at the stove beside them. Turns out, this is a laser gun with a neon green beam. When they try to disarm him, Paul beats the men up and throws them around for a few good slow-mo 3D shots of food ingredients being knocked into the air and falling toward camera. As they wrestle over the blaster, Paul is weirdly trigger-happy, firing beams haphazardly toward the victim of this assault and very nearly cutting her in half. The second assailant is tossed through one of those sneeze guard window panes, and it explodes in 1,000 3D shards. The first guy comes at Paul again with a stool, and Paul tosses him through a boarded-up door out of the building. Somehow certain the bad guys will not return, Paul unties the topless woman, and after a moment she turns rabbit on him and then scrambles out of the place to leave with her presumed captors. Turns out that was just their kink, and you interrupted. An old prospector character shows up randomly to thank Paul for cleaning up the joint.
Well, it's about time somebody kicked those nuts the hell out of here.
He introduces himself as Buddy, and invites Paul to his home as uncreepily as he can manage.
Come on over to my room and I'll give you a cup of coffee.
Coffee?
That's right. Real coffee.
You can literally hear the air quotes in his delivery, even when he's not doing them with his hands. Paul accepts, not having seen real coffee in quite some time, but despite Buddy's claim, it's not real coffee. It's a huge box of tiny instant coffee packs. Paul takes a seat at the man's table and has a minor freakout. Buddy says he doesn't want any mysterious illnesses in his home, and right away Paul offers to leave, but Buddy won't let him go without the coffee he promised. Paul finishes the drink and barely steps out the door before the topless feral woman reappears with a tree branch and smashes it down on the blaster, shattering a glass cylinder across the top of it and presumably rendering it inoperable. He throws her against a fence and slaps her hard when he's suddenly grabbed by one of the wild men from earlier. They wrestle on the ground for a bit beside a former swimming pool filled with sand, and when Paul pins the man down beside it, an angry rattlesnake leaps forward and bites the man on his face. Paul ends the fight by scooping up a big metal pipe and impaling the man through the chest, pinning him to a chain-link fence. The woman runs away, and the camera slowly pushes in on the pipe until, as expected, blood oozes out of it like a Tropicana blood orange. We see Paul back on the road, driving his van past a sign announcing the city of Joshua, population 64. Probably less now.
63.
Paul turns off the road into a Zyrex gas station. The listed 1992 gas prices are unleaded $40.57, methane $35.64, and gasohol $29.98. Weirdly exact prices for the only payment method they accept here.
Mm-hmm. Is it still 9/10?
I guess. The pumps look like standard gas station pumps, but futurized with glass pyramid hats on top. The attendant sits down playing with some kind of knockoff Simon Says toy while Paul fills up. Amazingly, in this cutthroat post-apocalypse, gas stations are still working on the honor system, where you pay for the product after you fill your car.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. It's just like, what stops somebody from just taking it?
Yeah, this guy better have a gun. He does, though. Paul squirts a couple gallons of fuel before stopping to pay, and the attendant refuses his cash, pointing a thumb at a new sign announcing Zyrex will only accept payments in silver. Luckily, Paul has a tube of silver coins in the van, and as he pays, he asks about a room to rent. The attendant jokes that he should try the Joshua Hilton, and so Paul just drives around town until he sees a sign advertising a room. He brings the thermos containing the second worm with him when he speaks to the woman renting it. The owner is an older woman played by Vivian Blaine, and she's clearly interested in Paul. She tells him she'd practically given up on renting the room in this ghost town.
I wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody comes around much anymore. That's why I'm not wearing much makeup.
An obvious joke because she's wearing a full face of heavy foundation. For whatever reason, despite being credited as Miss Elizabeth Daley, she introduces herself by another name.
Call me Maggie. I'll call you Paul.
He tells her he's only staying a few days and she won't take cash either. She asks for his gold ring and he thinks it's a steep price for such a short visit.
Well, there's always extras.
He hands it over, apparently agreeing to the price of a gold ring for a few nights' sleep and sex with Maggie. The picture dips to black as though for a commercial break, and we're transported to Paul's room where he unpacks his things. He rebuilds a smaller version of his Zyrex lab and then takes a nap. Sometime later, he's awoken by Maggie knocking at his door. She tells him not to lock it.
You've got nothing I haven't seen before.
Because many characters will have to wander in and out of here over the course of the film, and we don't want to explain why he would leave this room full of expensive equipment and dangerous samples unlocked all day. She just popped up to announce the place next door is serving food now. But they serve it all day.
Yeah.
It's in cans. When he talks her out of the room, he moves to a full-length mirror and unbuttons his shirt to observe a large black mass just under the skin around his belly button. We cut back to the desert as a black 1974 Lamborghini Countach pulls up to the same Zyrex gas station. A blonde man in a black suit steps out and speaks politely with the attendant. He orders a can of water and a full tank of methane.
Oh, I hope you got some money to pay for all this. Nobody's filled up their car with gas in years.
The man holds out a platinum Zyrex card to cover the cost. On Maggie's recommendation, Paul heads to Collins' New York Bar Grill and Barter next door to her place. The bartender, Collins, has some kind of a burn scar on his face. He reads Paul the menu.
Well, all we got left these days, pal, is canned fruit, canned beer, and canned soup.
Canned soup. I'll be fine.
Paul seems out of silver coins to pay with and offers Collins his shitty Casio calculator watch for the soup. Collins sits with Paul at a table to talk about the cities they came here from. New York for Collins, LA for Paul, but things got crazy in both places.
I feel like these people are weirdly willing to take things that are fairly useless in this post-apocalyptic world.
It's like,
for
am I going to recharge batteries for this watch?
Yeah, what are you going to do with this?
I mean, I guess you're hoping that somebody else will come along that you can barter with it to them, but...
Yeah. I mean, same thing with a ring. It's just like, I mean, I guess the gold itself maybe holds value, but...
If you're going to build a phone from scratch, like a smartphone, you need the gold to make some wires.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe gold doesn't even have any value in a post-apocalyptic world.
Apparently, there was a nationwide event that rained radioactive debris on everyone, causing the burn marks on Collins' face. Paul is put off his soup by the side of the scar, but assures Collins he's the first nice person he's met in Joshua, so apparently Maggie just sucks. A crowd of local kids wander in, led by gang leader Ricus. Before they've done anything, Collins is already tired of their shit. They put on some music and writhe incompetently to the beat. Or not to the beat. Ricus notices the customer Paul and sits at his table to harass the newbie. He asks how the soup tastes and then steals it away to finish it. Standing from the table, Paul knocks his thermos to the floor. A young woman named Patricia Wells enters, played by the first feature film appearance of Demi Moore, and the teens turn their attention on her. She's brought a bag of lemons from her garden for Collins.
Well, hey, Pat is here. It isn't Little Miss Lemon Grove of 1992, huh?
There we go, time-stamped it in the dialogue, perfect. Paul retrieves his thermos, and Ricus steals one of the lemons to take a big bite out of it.
Now, if you'll excuse me...
all this talk has made me hungry.
He just eats it and his whole mouth just caves in.
Collins tells Ricus and the kids to leave Patricia alone and to mind their own business. Ricus throws down his arm on the counter to show a Zyrex tattoo from when he was in business. He tries to make them feel sorry for him, since he was put to work as an orphan for the Zyrex Corporation. We cut to an extreme close-up of a book cover, The Pathology of Parasites by Dr. Paul Dean. Wider, we see that Maggie is reading the book in his room and wandering around inspecting all his scientific equipment. This is why she told him there was food next door. Get out of here for a second. I want to look at your shit. She sees organisms swimming around under his microscope because I guess he just left a sample on the slide.
Yeah, you know what? It's fine.
Like you do.
Or maybe that's just the kind of stuff that crawls around in these hotel rooms.
Oh, yeah. This is actually a sample from the bed.
Yeah. I was just making sure the blankets were clean. They're not. She hears Paul coming up the stairs and they cross paths in the hallway. Paul looks pained when he gets inside, sweating profusely, and unbuttons his shirt to access the growth on his chest. He takes a syringe full of red liquid and stabs it into the dark bubble under his skin. The pain seems to subside. Back outside, Patricia is walking to her Jeep to leave, but Ricus and his friends are sitting all over it. Ricus pretends he wants to apologize for their harassment by buying her a drink, but she's not interested. Ricus suggests forcing her to accept the offer, and even his girlfriend Dana, played by Cherie Currie, says they should let her go. Probably because she cares about Patricia as much as she's worried about being replaced by Patricia. Collins appears with a sawed-off shotgun in Ricus's face, and he releases Patricia. Collins stupidly lets the kids close enough to take the gun off him, and then they hold a hunting knife to his face and threaten to add more scars. Another gun goes off, and now it's Patricia's turn to rescue Collins with a handgun. Again, the teens let him go, and Patricia is too smart to let them close enough to disarm her. Paul watches this entire scene from an upstairs window and makes no effort to intervene on anyone's behalf. He heads back down to his van to unload more lab equipment, but he is intercepted by Ricus, who wants to know what all this stuff is.
Yeah, he couldn't have picked the worst time.
Yeah, they're literally down there right now. Just wait a second for them to go away. They throw a box of his possessions in the dirt and start playing keep away with another syringe when Paul finally takes an aggressive stance. Ricus slices open his arm with a hunting knife and shoves him back against the vehicle. Ricus heard a rumor Paul has silver and he wants what's left of it. Paul points them to a small plastic tube behind the front seat. Looks like there's only a couple coins left anyway. Some of the kids pin him to the ground in the dirt parking lot while Ricus and his geekier gang member friend Zeke go up to Paul's room to rifle through his possessions, and despite many expensive-looking appliances, they take only the thermos containing the second parasite sample.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess of all the things that they've seen, this was the one thing that he kept with him all the time.
Yeah, I guess. But it's just like, there's a microscope there, there's all these monitors that you could definitely trade in for money. It's like, what if this was just cold coffee?
Or Collins would certainly accept a microscope in exchange for more cans of soup.
Exactly. He can check the soup, make sure it's healthy. They load everyone into the skeleton of a 4-door sedan with no hood or side panels and drive it back to their hideout. They demand Paul open the canister, but when he refuses, they decide to open it themselves. Ricus gifts it to his second-in-command, Zeke, seemingly a kind gesture, but more likely a precautionary measure. Zeke literally reaches fully into the can like it's a tube of Pringles, and then a creature flies out of it to latch onto his shoulder. His skin smolders and fumes where the creature fuses to him.
Instead of trying to help him, they just immediately start beating the crap out of Paul. They just start kicking him around and throwing and punching him. I was like, well, come on, man. He tried to warn you.
I think they're assuming this is an elaborate trap of some sort. You tricked us into opening your thermos, you jerk. Although, honestly, he should have been saying, don't open that. Mm-hmm. There's a dangerous sample in there.
He did. This whole time he's saying, don't open it.
Yeah, but he should have explained the threat. Not just like implied that the rest of my silver is hidden in that.
Okay, yeah.
At the very least, the guy might not have reached his hand in if he'd said, there's a dangerous creature inside. We dip to black again and fade up on Patricia's face in her home. She watches unconscious Paul sleep on a couch, or a close approximation of a couch.
So are we to assume that she drove to their hideout and picked him up, or that they threw him out of the car somewhere?
Yeah, this dip to black is doing a lot of work. It's weird that we never bothered to explain the transition, though. He was just a hostage of Ricus and the gang, and then magically transported mid-fight to Patricia's living room. Even though the kids would obviously hold on to him for some explanation of what this creature is and how to get it off their friend.
And that, my friends, is the power of editing.
If you dip to black, people forget everything. She offers him rattlesnake tea to help him recover, and when he refuses the drink, she admits she was joking, and it's just lemon tea. He barely takes a sip before
It's just
falling...
a rat.
Just kidding, it's not lemons. It was rattlesnake. I just need you to drink it. He barely takes a sip before falling back and writhing in pain again. He closes his eyes, and Patricia stares down at him in shock, seeming to imply that she sees the undulations of the growth in his chest through his shirt, but we don't confirm that here. On the edge of town, the Lamborghini pulls up to a park, and closer now we can see that it has what looks like chess pieces glued to the hood for some reason. The driver, credited as Wolf the Merchant, steps out and pulls on some gloves as he walks toward the cafeteria where Paul had his first fight of the film. He finds shards of Paul's destroyed laser blaster on the ground, and Buddy the prospector finds Wolf here.
Help you there, fella?
Buddy denies any knowledge of Paul's whereabouts, even after the merchant describes him accurately. It's clear he's trying to protect his new friend. Wolf the Merchant holds up the shard from Paul's blaster as though it proves Buddy encountered Paul. Then he extends another blaster from his sleeve to swing a yellow laser beam across Buddy's wrist, slicing his hand cleanly from his right arm.
God damn it, now wait a minute. No, Jesus, don't.
We see it wriggling in the dirt for a moment. We dip to black again, and then fade up on the Lamborghini speeding down the road toward Collins' New York Bar, Grill, and Barter. When Wolf the Merchant takes a seat at the bar, Collins reads him the same menu, but with lemonade added. Around here is where I noticed a sign over the bar, a large photograph of Ronald Reagan, and a caption that reads, Draft Reagan in 1988. So I guess there was like a giant world war kicking off around that time, and they decided that he should serve in it. I'm not clear exactly what's happening here, unless they're talking about just electing him for a third term, even though this film came out just after he'd started his first term. Wolf the Merchant tricks Collins into admitting another man drove through town recently and stopped into his place. We cut back to Patricia's home, where she tends to her small lemon garden. Inside the house, she hears a loud noise and runs to find Paul attempting to stand and leave. She thinks he needs more time to recover, but he disagrees.
I've no time to rest. Don't you understand?
No, I don't. As a matter of fact, I don't even know what I'm getting involved with.
Paul admits that he needs her help, starting with a ride back to his room in town. He promises to explain everything there. The Lamborghini pulls back up to the Zyrex station. When it seems abandoned, Wolf does some exploring and finds Paul's Zyrex van covered in tarps on the property. Just as he starts pulling the tarps down, the attendant appears with a gun.
Looking for something?
Wolf says he's just looking for a friend and claims Collins pointed him in this direction, but the attendant says Collins was mistaken. We cut right to Wolf knocking on Maggie's door and demanding to be let into the building. He informs her he'll be renting a room here tonight. Back at Ricus's hideout, everyone looks pretty upset, especially Zeke, who is still slowly dying from the injuries he is constantly incurring from the parasite. Zeke makes Ricus promise they won't let him die, but almost immediately, the parasite is feeding on him again when Ricus tries to cut it off, and it only digs in deeper. As Zeke screams in pain, we hard cut to a close-up of the unlocked door of Paul's room, where Wolf lets himself in and digs through all of Paul's equipment in search of the canister.
I'm surprised that they didn't try a method other than the knife. Like if it was like a
Flames
leech
or something.
Yeah, you know, hold on. He just like blows out a single match and just puts it on it. Works for leeches.
Nobody else got hit? Patricia parks outside Maggie's building with Paul, and amazingly, neither of them notices the gorgeous Lamborghini parked 15 feet away that would surely have alerted Paul to the presence of his IREX agent. When he hears Paul pull up outside, Wolf hides to watch the man. Paul packs up what's left of his belongings after the kids ransack the place and leaves with 2 small boxes of equipment. Patricia helps him load them into her Jeep, and they drive away together. Patricia drives Paul out to her cabin beside the Vasquez Rocks, and Wolf tries to follow in his Lambo, but finds his path suddenly blocked by an ambulance and the hoodless car of Ricus's gang. They hold Wolf at knife point and demand to know his connection to Paul. Wolf tells them he has many more silver coins and no use for them, but when one of the guys tries to pat him down, he extends his sleeve laser again and swings it willy-nilly at the kids, slicing a few of them pretty good. But this isn't like the Johnny Mnemonic level laser this time. He's just burning their skin badly, not slicing them in half. He must have turned it down since he cut off Buddy's hand.
Yeah, I mean, he like nicks a guy in the ear, and like for the rest of the scenes you see him in, he's holding his ear, so it's possible that he cut it off, but we never see it.
I bet that guy wore a huge bandage on his ear for like the whole next week, and then there was no scar after. Wolf pins Ricus against the ambulance and notices the kid's Zyrex tattoo.
Won't you come back to us? Like hell I will.
Wolf slaps Ricus hard across the face and demands the kids clear the way for him to leave, and they do. Paul carries his surviving equipment into Patricia's place and sets about rebuilding his miniature laboratory. Patricia reminds him that he promised more information, and he reluctantly shares it. She has gathered that he worked with the Zyrax merchants and that he has a parasite in his stomach.
I created it.
For the merchants? Why?
I fought for the government. They're so mixed up with the merchants now. They work for one another.
Paul tells her that the parasite in his chest is basically a ticking time bomb. It has periods of dormancy, but it's still alive, and when it hatches, he will not survive. He tells her about the second parasite latched onto Zeke, and then tries to get credit for destroying all but 2 of them.
I destroyed the rest when I found out what the merchants intended to use them for.
Could have destroyed a couple more is all I'm saying. We might not be in this particular mess if you had.
So that explains the scene when he's trying to put him into the machine and the guy stops him.
Right.
See, I interpreted it, when we first see it, is that it was just some guy trying to talk to him or get his attention and spooked him.
Yeah.
And he accidentally spilled them all.
Yeah.
But maybe that machine he was trying to load them into was a microwave, and Wolf just fucked up this exact plan. Paul tells Patricia he needs the parasite attached to Zeke to develop a cure for his own infection. He also shares with Patricia the creature's unfortunate reproduction habits.
When it reproduces, it will cast millions of microscopic spores into the air. And wherever a spore touches you, the parasite will grow.
Patricia is shocked to silence and tries to take a seat when we dip to black again and come back up in the hideout where Zeke is still slowly dying from the parasitic organism latched onto him. Dana sees Ricus as having trouble sleeping tonight, and she guesses he's worried for their friend. Ricus says he's being reminded of the horrors of his time at Zyrex's suburban work camps. As a young orphan, they had to learn not to get too attached to their co-workers since violent deaths were a common occurrence. The next morning, Ricus wakes slowly and goes to check on Zeke, who has died in the night. His face is a sunken puppet of the actor, and Ricus pulls down the blanket to reveal an empty, gaping wound. The parasite is no longer attached to him. The gang are suddenly terrified.
Jesus. Damn thing killed him.
Where is it?
Ricus walks across the hideout to the still sleeping Dana. He tells her Zeke is dead, and then lifts her blankets to reveal the parasite beside her. It's not attached yet, just cuddling in the blankets.
That was my thoughts exactly. It's just there for a good snuggle.
And Ricus coaches her away from it.
Move your legs towards me. Real slow. Real slow.
Before she can get out of the bed, the parasite senses her motion and latches onto her leg. Her eyes go wide and she passes out from shock. Ricus lifts the girl in her entire sleeping bag and rushes her to the car. On set, Dana actress Cherie Currie asked if she could throw an arm over the Ricus actor to support herself, but director Charles Band reminded her the character is supposed to be unconscious here. Unfortunately, the actor tripped and dropped her on her back on this concrete floor, and the production had to shoot around her for several days while she recovered from a mild spinal injury.
Oof.
Interesting that Dana being attacked warrants an emergency trip to town when Zeke was just left to die here in the night.
Right.
They're like, oh my God, now we got to do something. Dana's hurt. Working in the makeshift lab at Patricia's place, Paul suffers another attack and has to quickly inject his infection again. He confesses again to Patricia that he will never find a cure without the second parasite. Ricus skids up to Colin's place and pounds on the door until he appears in the doorway, shotgun in hand.
Breaking in during off hours, Ricus? A great opportunity to blow your ass away.
Dana's in the car. She's dying. Go look for yourself.
I think this is such a funny relationship
Yeah.
because, like, I mean, we don't know who else is in this town aside from, you know, our hotel lady and these, like, punk kids and this one guy that runs the restaurant. But, you know, the way they portray it early in the movie, it's like they're a problem for each other.
Yeah.
And, you know, here it's like they're BFFs.
Yeah, it's funny because it's taking a turn from these guys constantly threatening to murder each other with different weapons, and then suddenly he's got the shotgun in his face and he's like, cut it out, Collins, this is serious. My girlfriend's sick. It's like, I was going to murder you right now. When Collins looks into the car, he can see Dana's face is practically purple as she's shivering and dripping with sweat. They take her to Maggie's place and put her on a bed in an open room upstairs. When they unzip the sleeping bag, the parasite is briefly disconnected from the girl, but then turns around to take a big bite out of her leg, and she screams. Maggie informs them Paul is a doctor, and Collins tells them he's staying at Patricia's cabin. Ricus leaves to find him.
I love the fact that they don't even, Ricus doesn't even consider, hey,
oh my God, he is a doctor.
Maybe that guy who had the parasite might know something about the parasite.
The guy who mentioned about medicine before, maybe he has medicine. Back at the cabin, Patricia is working in the kitchen when Wolf walks in.
Paul? Hello. That's who I'm looking for, Paul Dean. Where is he?
Who are you?
She claims not to know where Paul is, and when Wolf accuses her of harboring a fugitive, she insists Paul isn't here. He grabs her by the hair and slaps her around, demanding Paul's location. He throws her against what would be a brick wall, but there's a giant padded mat leaned against the wall for her to crash into. Usually the production would hide a mat like this, so the shove looks more violent, but I guess they didn't care how painless it looked. Patricia serves the guy a solid right cross and tries to make a run for it, but he tackles her into the dirt of her lemon garden and flicks his laser beam on to intimidate her into talking.
Now, Paul Dean, where is he?
Ricus rolls up and parks behind the Lamborghini on the dirt road, and when Wolf realizes they aren't alone, he hits pause on Patricia, knocking her out with another punch, and leaves to find the new visitor. By the time he gets to the Lambo, Ricus's car is gone, but Ricus sneaks up behind him with a 2x4 and smacks his arm hard enough to make him drop his laser weapon. As they continue fighting, Ricus withdraws a sword from a sheath on his belt. Probably should have started with this weapon, maybe taken the guy's arm off with that element of surprise swing. Ricus gets the guy on the ground and kicks the shit out of him at the base of the Vasquez rocks. He pulls off the man's gloves to reveal the Zyrex tattoo we saw at the start of the film. I guess this is meant to be a twist because they avoided showing his face at the start, but really, who else could this possibly have been?
Also, I just assumed every person, every agent would have, we've already established that they all have tattoos.
Yeah.
Also, I had my money that he was a robot. I was like,
but it wasn't.
I was like, really, I was like, oh man, the big reveal is this guy's gonna be a robot.
Weirdly, Ricus leaves the guy there unconscious instead of neutralizing the threat with a well-placed sword. Ricus pops into Patricia's place. She doesn't respond when he calls her name, and we dip to black before we see Patricia waking up in the garden. She wanders back into the house and passes out again on the floor, never encountering Ricus, who must have left without checking the garden. Wolf wakes up in the dirt road and limps to his Lamborghini. He injects his hand with something, I guess to heal it, who knows. Amazingly, Paul finds Patricia on the floor before anyone else does. He asks who did this with regard to her bloodied mouth, and from her description, Paul concludes this is the work of Wolf from Zyrex.
Wolf was a government liaison man on the project. Easy. I knew he'd show up.
Hey, maybe you could have warned me that this guy was going to show up and he wouldn't be super nice.
Well, it turns out that Vanessa was a fembot.
Yes, we knew all along, sadly.
Her bloody mouth is like really like off-putting.
Yeah.
Her lips almost look swollen.
Yeah.
Like it looks like she actually got hit on accident.
And she's like mumbling, like she's actually got her jaw like is like swollen or something, and she can't speak.
Yeah, I was impressed with that makeup look too.
I think it was Loaded Weapon, and the love interest gets shot, and she's like coughing up blood, and she's like, "Kiss me," and Emilio Estevez is like looking at her and cringing because she's got blood all over her mouth, and she keeps gagging and coughing.
Despite earlier claims that he couldn't possibly eradicate the parasite without access to the second sample, Paul has somehow spontaneously determined that high-frequency sound waves are enough to destroy them. Instead of testing his theory right now with her at the cabin, they head back to town, but maybe she doesn't have electricity out here. Back at the hotel, we see Dana convulsing in bed and then appearing to die, which causes the parasite to sneak out from under her blankets.
I feel like parasite isn't a great word to use for these things.
Yeah.
Parasites
they're not keeping you alive for very long.
Yeah, they generally like to keep their hosts alive so that they can have time to just reproduce.
I mean, one of them is being a very good parasite.
Yeah, but he's staving off whatever the
That's
hell
true.
is happening to these other guys with this red injection that he's getting. So it seems like they're killing their hosts fairly quickly,
Yeah.
which is not really it's not really a parasitic relationship there.
Not at all. The camera pans to the adjoining bathroom where Maggie is putting on makeup.
Not bad. Still a lot of life there yet.
We get a shot of the window beside her as the parasite slides up the glass, and just as she notices the smear up the window, something drips on her hand from above. When she looks up, she sees the parasite letting go of the ceiling and falling mouth first toward her. She screams.
I feel like this is the shot of the film.
For sure. It's definitely in the trailer, too.
Yeah, this is supposed to be the one where you have a full mouth coming straight at you in 3D.
And then that's when it cuts to Parasite.
Yeah.
Coming Friday.
To your intestines. We dissolve to Maggie lying on the ground in the room, tossing and turning as her face tightens into that of a skeletal puppet, like how Zeke looked when they found him dead. It's clear the actress has been replaced with a full-body animatronic, but it tosses and turns realistically and even blinks its eyes.
But why?
I don't know.
Like, I feel like I don't know why they bothered. Just put her in some makeup.
But everybody has looked like this except for
Yeah.
Dana, for some reason, didn't look like this when she died. But I know why this lady has to look like this because of what's about to happen.
It's not as good as the like zombie husks in Life Force.
Sure.
Those things were amazing.
Yeah, those are pretty terrifying. But this is a very well-made prop and probably the most impressive shot in terms of production value that this film has to offer. We dissolve closer and closer as she writhes and breathes raggedly on the floor, but after some seizures, she stops moving, and then the parasite bursts directly out of her face toward camera. Patricia and Paul arrive to find Dana first, dead in the upstairs bedroom, and then Maggie, or what's left of her, collapsed on the floor nearby. Patricia backs away terrified and nearly crashes into the loose parasite. Paul pulls her away from it, and the creature slithers out the door, leaving a slimy red trail as it goes. Despite leaving a clearly visible trail, they have trouble tracking it down until Paul notices it on a table beside them. He throws a blanket over it, and Patricia jabs it with the same fluid Paul has been using on his own parasite, but it still gets away from them. Collins shows up to help walk Paul down the stairs. Paul's own parasite is wreaking havoc in his chest, so Patricia plugs in an oscilloscope to attack it with high-frequency sound. Collins offers to start up the generator to power Paul's equipment. He says it's out back, and then we cut to him descending the stairs into the basement where it actually is. Maybe he's trying to keep it secret.
I think the first time I ever saw an oscilloscope was in Mist.
There you go.
Nice.
Just Richard's favorite.
He's interrupted by Wolf in the basement.
You shouldn't have come down here, old man.
The electricity does eventually start up, and Patricia cranks the equipment as high as it will go. Eventually, Paul's growth stretches and bursts open, splashing blood, meat, and his own parasite several feet through the air, where it lands on Patricia's arm. Fortunately for them, it's dead and smoldering, so it falls right off of her.
It still kind of bites her, though. Like,
Yeah.
she's got bite marks.
But it doesn't, latch on completely. In the basement, Wolf still has Collins in a headlock when Ricus appears behind them both with a gun. Wolf releases Collins, but spins around with his laser armed and slashes through Ricus with it, knocking him down. and Wolf heads upstairs.
You saved my life.
I guess you owe me one, Scarfed.
He dies. Wolf overhears Patricia and Paul planning on killing the second creature and points his laser weapon in their faces to persuade them otherwise.
I can't let you do that, Dean.
Paul knocks the laser out of his hand, and Wolf kicks Patricia in the face to knock her out again before chasing Paul upstairs unarmed. The two men wrestle on the floor of the upstairs hallway just as the last parasite creeps toward them. It leaps through the air and latches onto Wolf's face, and in his panic to shake the creature off, he falls through a door onto the fire escape and then down to the parking lot below.
We get kind of a repeat of the swimming pool full of sand scene.
Yeah.
Where they're rolling and trying to push each other towards
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it chooses wisely. Wolf tries to stand again in the parking lot below and fight off the creature, leaning against a fuel tank in the lot. Patricia fires her gun at the tank, triggering a massive explosion, and we see a long, full body burn in the flames. When they clear, we find Wolf's burnt skeleton on the ground, looking something like Tarman from Return of the Living Dead.
Oh, God, it is a very wet skeleton.
Yeah.
You're finally free. It's over.
We see one last brief insert of the parasite creature, and then fade to black for credits to roll. The end. Parasite, aka Parasite in 3D. It's fine. It's a Charles Band movie, so super low budget, minimal locations, not very engaging.
I think what makes me mad about it is I have so many questions about the world, and I don't want to have this many questions over the quality of this movie. Like, it's like I want to know what there's like this corporation and everyone, like, there's so many layers to what's going on, that they can only run electricity between certain times of the day. And, but that's all just like flavor, because it didn't need to be a post-apocalyptic movie. It could have just been a guy's working in a normal modern lab.
These movies are made post-apocalyptic so that you can excuse hiring zero extras and using empty locations.
Yeah.
Abandoned houses.
And so you can
stuff.
shoot it all out in the desert and 3 buildings that nobody cares
and you're
about.
not going to some hospital to try to solve this problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Explain why they're not doing that. But the creature design is pretty basic and lame. They're all just like hand puppets for the most part. And I feel like the bodies of the victims are actually better designed than the creatures, which is weird. But yeah, there's not much here. And even as a 3D movie, I don't think it utilizes the full effect.
No, like I said, most of the 3D stuff was stuff uselessly hanging in the foreground.
Yeah.
Just because we need something, so they just made some junk art.
Yeah, it's never like you think something's coming out at you and you're freaked out. It's always just like, oh wow, these graduated cylinders, I can almost reach them.
Yeah, there isn't a lot of suspense either. Like, it's really, you don't really care too much who lives or dies. It doesn't really matter. We don't care about our main character.
And there's a lot of repetition to it in terms of like, now we're here for a while. This happened. Oh, it happened again. Now we're over here for a while. Now I fell asleep here. Now I fell asleep over here. Why couldn't he have found her in the garden? Why does she have to get up and go into a different room and fall asleep again?
I mean, 100% feels like somebody watched Alien and was like, oh, let's make a whole movie like that.
Yeah.
And that's all they had. And it didn't get any more fleshed out than that.
Yeah, there's no cause for him to think that the sound was going to do anything.
It seems like a rewrite, like a last second, like, oh, we don't have time to do the thing where he experiments on the other parasite.
Yeah. And there were so many opportunities that you could have squeezed it into the story. Like when they're in like the junk warehouse or something like that and it's on Zeke, like someone could have dropped like a wrench and it chimes and it like
you're stealing from Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, exactly. like there's some opportunity to put some kind of thing to make a logical leap other than, hey, I'm going to try sound since drugs don't seem to work.
Yeah. Or not
fire.
Fast enough.
Or fire. Again, I also feel like fire was obviously very effective.
Yeah.
So just cauterize it. Like, it seems like he has options that he just isn't willing to explore.
Yeah. He could also just do a cesarean or something. Just take that thing out of you.
I don't know, fire. I mean, should he just throw himself in the fire?
Well, I mean, maybe just, like I said, just take a hot iron and just
brand
press it
yourself.
Yeah. Hey,
I guess it works with the one that's sitting on the outside. It works less well when it's buried in your intestines.
You also run the risk of like
it going deeper.
That thing where you take the pipe and you heat it up so the rats eat their way through.
Oh no, that's true. Yeah.
Because then it's going to try and come out the back because it's like, oh, it's hot in front of me. Maybe if he swallowed some flaming hot coals, then it would scare it out of him.
Let's get some flaming hot Cheetos in here.
Yeah. I'm going to get Chipotle's hot sauce. I'm going to just shit this thing out.
Or just get really drunk.
Oh, there you go. And then the thing will get drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll get lost trying to get out of you. That's not good.
Anyway. It was interesting. There was some, like, I'm mostly interested in how they got that Lamborghini.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Like, of all the things that they had in this movie, where did they get that car?
I think, honestly, the fact that it's in 3D, the fact that animatronic of Maggie looked so cool, and that it's Demi Moore's first movie is like everything this movie has going for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The rest of it is just lazy writing, and you can tell that so many of the scenes are literally just, oh, we ended this shoot day here, but then we started the next day here, so we need a scene to connect these two.
It's
Let's
not
do a random
enough
thing.
though.
Yeah.
It's still a thumbs down for me.
I don't know.
You gonna tell anybody to watch this?
No.
Yeah.
I think it is a thumbs down. I mean, if you're a completist of Demi Moore's career, but this is not representative of the work, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, more of a completist for me would be for like Stan Winston.
Sure.
But yeah,
but that's a hard marathon too, because there's a lot of real low budget stuff on that list.
Exactly. So. Yeah, it's a thumbs down for me. Okay. I'm not sorry I saw it, and I was always glad to see a movie in 3D, even though sometimes my eyes don't work with 3D. But just the novelty of it was fun.
I love that Kino even gave this film the chance of being presented the way that the filmmakers wanted it to be, because that's great. I wish every movie would get a release that's held to this standard of like, it's a really nice scan. I never couldn't tell what was happening. It looks good. The 3D technically works. And that's impressive for a movie that came out in 82 that really didn't deserve to be remembered.
Yeah.
But the problem is, I think that they should have stuck with the Anglyph Red Blue, because
probably
they don't make I don't think they've made 3D TV since 2016. And so
to do it in 2019.
Yeah, to release this in a 3D in that format.
The newest TV you could watch it on would have been 3 years old.
Yeah. So I feel like that was a big misstep. But maybe that's how long it was like in the pipeline for them.
And maybe it's a matter of how it's shot initially that you don't have the choice of doing it that way. Because I know Red Blue is not always an option depending on how the film was initially shot. But who knows? But yeah, so 3 thumbs down. What are we thinking Letterboxd?
Oof. I don't have it very high because I didn't really care for this movie.
Yeah.
It is 37 out of 39.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
See,
it's below The Last Shark and above The Comeback Trail.
See, I have a pretty high, not super high, but because I feel like I would probably watch this again sooner than some of the.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have it at 21st, which puts it below Butterfly, but above I'm Dancing as Fast as I Can.
Oh.
Ouch.
That's so sad.
Because I would definitely watch Parasite over I'm Dancing as Fast as I Can.
I don't know.
Sure.
There's something about Nicole Williamson just like screaming at her for no reason. What do you mean you're a bar of soap? I have it in 35th out of 39. It's just under Night Crossing and just above Final Assignment. So it splits up those shitty spy movies.
Yeah.
Our director here was Charles Band. He's the founder of Empire Pictures, producer of the Ghoulies, Trancer, and Reanimator films, Full Moon Features, producer of the Puppet Master and Subspecies series, and Moonbeam Entertainment, producer of family-friendly Prehysteria trilogy. This was only his 3rd directing credit, and he's back next season with another 3D offering of Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Sin, and later the first couple Trancer movies, Prehysteria, The Ginger Dead Man, Evil Bong, and many sequels to all of those. His son Alex is the frontman of rock band The Calling, best known for their single, Wherever You Will Go. I'll go wherever you will go. You remember that song?
I do remember that song.
That's his dad directed this.
That's definitely in a movie. What movie is that in?
Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Sin. No, I don't know. Writer Alan J. Adler also writes Metal Storm next season, and later The Dungeon Master, and an episode each of Ghostbusters, not that Ghostbusters, and Star Trek TNG. And by not that Ghostbusters, I mean the one with the ape. Another writer credit for Michael Shoob. His only other writing credit was for 1996's Driven, which he also directed, starring Xander Berkeley. And the third writing credit goes to Frank Levering, Just This. The music here came from Richard Band. He previously composed Laser Blast, and so far on the show minisode titles The Day Time Ended and Dr. Heckle and Mr. Hype. Later he scores Time Walker, House on Sorority Row, Metal Storm, Ghoulies, Reanimator, Troll, Terror Vision, Puppet Master, Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, The Pit and the Pendulum, Prehysteria, Remote, and one of the Clay Fighter video games.
Yeah.
And as his name would suggest, he is the brother of director Charles Band.
There's definitely some good titles in there.
Yeah, no, there's some decent stuff.
I like Ghoulies is a lot of fun.
Yeah, the third one is, specifically.
Sorry, I figured it out.
What? What movie is it?
It's the bar scene at the end of Love Actually.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. When we're in Wisconsin.
Yeah, you get it.
Playing in the bar.
They shot it in your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Britain.
But they didn't.
Britain.
Yeah.
The cabbie has like a New York accent.
That's great. Hey, it was a long drive. He flew to New York and then took a cab to Wisconsin. The cinematographer was Mac Alberg. Last time we mentioned him, it was for directing minisode title Hoodlums. He has DP credits on Hell Night and The Seduction for us so far, and later My Tutor, Metal Storm, Ghoulies, Trancers, Reanimator, House, Dolls, Deep Star 6, My Boyfriend's Back, Beverly Hills Cop 3, The Brady Bunch Movie, A Very Brady Sequel, Good Burger, and Evil Bong. The editor here was Brad Aaronsman. He later cuts Metal Storm and Ghost Warrior. Robert Glaudini played Dr. Paul Dean. After this, he's in Grunt, the Wrestling Movie, Mississippi Burning, Cutting Class, and Bugsy. He also wrote the original play and screenplay adaptation of Jack Goes Boating, which stars and was directed by Philip Seymour Hoffman, his only directing credit. So the guy who plays Paul in this movie wrote the only film that Philip Seymour Hoffman ever directed. Demi Moore plays Patricia Wells. This was the first and, by her estimate, the worst film of future A-lister Demi Moore. During a 2019 appearance on The Late Late Show with James Corden, she had this to say about Parasite.
What's the worst movie you've ever been in?
Actually, that one is easy. And I'm so happy that I have the answer to this one. It's Parasite in 3D.
Parasite in 3D.
Did you miss that one too?
I missed it.
Later, she appears in Blame It on Rio, St. Elmo's Fire, One Crazy Summer. She made an appearance on Moonlighting alongside her at-the-time husband, Bruce Willis. And later she's in Ghost, Nothing But Trouble, A Few Good Men, Disclosure, Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame, Striptease, and G.I. Jane, among many other credits.
I'm glad she didn't list Nothing But Trouble as her worst movie.
Yeah. Luca Bercovici played Ricus. After this, he has a lot of TV appearances on shows like The Fall Guy, Airwolf, Amazing Stories, Silk Stockings, Sequest 2032, and Walker, Texas Ranger. He also directed Ghoulies for bands Empire Pictures and Rockula for Canon Films. So he actually directed the first Ghoulies, Ricus did. James Davidson played Wolf the Merchant. He has lots of TV credits leading up to this, and we saw him as an intern in The Mechanic. This was his final IMDb credit for some reason. Al Fann played Collins. Before this, we've seen him in The French Connection. He's also in The Super Cops, and he does voices in Super Friends, Plastic Man, Captain Caveman, and The Teen Angels, and Richie Rich before this. Later, he voices Swarm in 24 episodes of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and lots of Scooby-Doo variations, but he's probably most recognizable to Richard and I for his appearance as Phoenix Foundation agent Kelly Sutton from MacGyver episode Twice Stung, wherein he attempts suicide after being scammed out of his life savings, but is recruited by Mac and Pete to scam the scammer and get Kelly's money back. Later, he's also a superintendent in The Fisher King, and more recently, he was the father of Wanda Sykes on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Tom Villard played Zeke. We saw him last in Force 5, and he's back next for Grease 2, Surf 2, One Crazy Summer, Shakes the Clown, My Girl, and In the Army Now. Scott Thomson not that Scott Thomson, played Chris. He previously appeared in Smokey and the Bandit. He's back this season for Fast Times at Ridgemont High and later Police Academy, Ghoulies, Johnny Dangerously, RoboCop, Twister, Clueless, the G-rated Jack Frost, Blast from the Past, and Clock Stoppers. Cherie Currie played Dana. In the first script she was provided, her character had very little to do, and she held out for a rewrite, which expanded her role. And then in post, they intentionally cut all those new pages.
Aww.
Between the bait-and-switch script and her long-term back injury, Currie doesn't have much nice to say about the finished product. She was the singer from The Runaways, portrayed by Dakota Fanning in the film The Runaways. She's Sarah in Joe Dante's Twilight Zone segment, It's a Good Life. We saw her last as the ill-fated Annie in Foxes, and her sister Sandra was in Last Married Couple in America. Vivian Blaine played Miss Elizabeth Daley. She has many big credits dating back to the early 40s. She's Miss Adelaide in Guys and Dolls, Courtney Floyd in The Dark, and this was her second to last film credit before I'm Going to Be Famous. Joannelle Romero played Beau. We saw her recently as young prostitute in Barbarossa from the knife fight at the bar. Claiming Cheyenne ancestry, she has devoted most of her career to directing and producing documentaries and dramatic works with a focus on the Native American experience. She is also the founder and president of Red Nation Television Network and the Red Nation International Film Festival. Freddy Moore played Arn. He's probably more famous as a rock musician, whose biggest hit 1980's It's Not a Rumor he wrote with his new wife and Parasite co-star Demi Moore. I was confused for a moment because Demi later married Bruce Willis and their oldest daughter is named Rumor, but apparently it's not a reference to Freddie Moore's hit song, but to novelist Rumor Godden, whose works have been adapted into Black Narcissus and The River. Cheryl Smith played another captive girl. That's, I think, the feral topless woman from The Cafeteria. Before this, she's in Evel Knievel, Caged Heat, The Swinging Cheerleaders, Phantom of the Paradise, Farewell My Lovely, The Pom Pom Girls. She's Cinderella in that late 70s soft porn Cinderella. She's in The Incredible Melting Man, Laser Blast, Up in Smoke, and so far on the show, Logan's Run, Melvin and Howard, Nice Dreams, and Vice Squad. Later this season, she's back in Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. I think that's everything for Parasite. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share, you can find all our socials at linktree/vintagevideopod. If you enjoy what we're doing, consider giving us a review on iTunes. I don't think it helps visibility, but it's good for morale. And if you really like the show, maybe you should join our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/vintagevideopodcast for access to all our monthly 70s reviews and a hand in choosing next month's film. Patrons are currently choosing between Airport 1975, Benji, Female Trouble, The Gambler, Gold, The House on Skull Mountain, Law and Disorder, The Odessa File, The Taking of Pelham 123, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre for a 50th anniversary review next month. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time when we'll be discussing Death Trap, which IMDb describes like so. A struggling playwright invites a young writer to his home to discuss a script, but the meeting spirals into a deadly game of deception and betrayal. We leave you now with the trailer for Death Trap.
With a turn of a knife and a twist in the plot, Death Trap is everything it's not.
Sydney, people are always interested in psychics who can point at someone and say, that man murdered that man!
Are you trying to say that you don't think that you can trust me?
Sydney? My heart won't take it.
Death Trap. Death Trap.
Death Trap!
To show you any more would be a crime. So join Michael Caine, Christopher Reeve, and Diane Cannon in Ira Levin's Death Trap.
In for the kill, right?
No, definitely not. Blood in the carpet.